One of the other key ideas that keeps coming through and that we've all throughout this collab heard is the idea that we need more proof of concept, right? We need more examples. They might be small, they might be big, but every example that we can see, changing, trying something new, putting something in the ground to learn from it, is going to move us collectively toward our goals of, Basil and I have been calling this now, the goal is we want, landscapes, we're trying to create landscapes that grow up and give back. So some of you have heard me use the analogy of we don't want the kid who nurses forever and stays in your home and feeds off your wallet and your resources forever and lives in the basement. We're trying to get to responsible, mature, adult landscapes who are good, members of society. These proof of concept and these little, these demonstration projects around the state can help us move in that direction. And one point that Pierce made to me was, there was a key turning point when the Florida Native Plant Society and some of their members went to the villages about a year and a half ago, and the outside Collab coordinated a visit to the villages to see landscapes that they had changed out to be, dominant native landscapes. They were just beautiful, and it was by choice by these homeowners. And that was a real turning point and an eye-opener that, yes, this can be done. It can be done in the villages, it can be done in Florida. We're going to hear more about how it can be done and the design process for that with our next panel. So please welcome Johan Bueno and Gail Hansen, who are going to be talking with us about exploring pattern books for these alternative landscapes and best practices for making them happen. And yes, you can clap. So Johan Bueno is a senior designer at Dix Height Partners. Johan specializes in the technical aspects of landscape architecture. He is proficient in advanced CAD and 3D modeling skills, has experience in various project types, including roadway projects, public realm design, multifamily housing, and mixed-use projects. Welcome. And I shouldn't need my notes to read these. Feels silly. Dr. Gail Hansen is a professor in the Department of Environmental Horticulture at the University of Florida. She is also the UF IFAS Extension Specialist in Landscape Design, a faculty member in the Center for Land Use Efficiency, and a faculty advisor for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And she's just also an amazing person and collaborator and teacher. She has an MLA and a PhD in landscape architecture from the University of Florida. Take it away, Gail.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. It works. All right, so I'm going to be talking, I have about 10 minutes here to talk about landscape pattern books and best management practices, which I could talk about all day, but I'm going to be short here. And I'm going to talk about how landscape pattern books can help us with this shifting the urban landscape paradigm. So I've been working on a project with Wildlight community up in Yulee, which is north of Jacksonville. And this has been a team project. So I have 2 landscape architecture students. Where are they? Andreas Molina and Eric Gomez, who have been working on this project with me. I also had 18 students in my planting design studio who were working on this project. And Dr. Taylor Clem, he was a former PhD student of mine, and he is now the county director up in Nassau County, where Wildlight is located. So I'm not going to tell you very much about Wildlight because Greg Jones is here, and he's going to talk about it later on today. But what I did want to say is that they had asked us to look at their landscape pattern book and kind of assess it, because it was the landscape pattern book that was written just for the very first neighborhood, a very small neighborhood. And so they wanted us to take a look at it and say, is there anything we need to change at this point before we start building out all the other neighborhoods? Because it's a newish kind of development. So we took a look at the landscape book and we said, well, it looks pretty good. It has the right vision in it, the right goals, strategies, and so forth. So what's wrong with it? So we decided we needed to take a trip up there, and all my students and I jumped in a big red bus that was generously paid for by peers. Went up there, and we were walking around, and then we realized why we needed to take a look at this pattern book. And the problem was actually that we were seeing some really weird landscapes, and we decided that, you know what, they just didn't follow the pattern book. That was the problem. So, for example, this one, a whole forest of shrubs, which will actually get really tall and really wide. We saw some really weird things going on with some little turf, whatever. And this too, where we saw these kind of tall hedges right along the sidewalk, and where you had to like look over it to see the landscape on the other side of it. So we're like, okay, we could fix these. We'll just tear out all the plants and we'll start over and we'll do it right. Okay, but the problem with that was I started talking to Taylor Clam, and he said, you got to come back up here and look at these landscapes. He goes, I'm working with some of the contractors up here, and we have some problems up here. So Andy and Eric and I went back up, walked around with him, and these are some of the things that we saw. For example, a lot of poor drainage in some of the lots, and so it was leading to the Pythium root rot in a lot of the turf. A lot of torpedo grass in the plant beds there, and even in the turf. Tip dieback on almost every street tree there. And then this, this was actually a photo that I took on our first tour. So there were like 20 college students standing outside of this person's house, staring at their yard. So the owner came out and he said, "What are you guys looking at?" And he said, "I don't have any plants in my yard." And I said, "That's exactly what we're looking at. You don't have any plants in your yard." And then he was complaining about how hard it was to grow plants there. So Dr. Clem was telling us it's a soil issue. He has been working with the management team up there, and they've taken soil samples, and it's a really big problem up there, and I'll tell you in a minute why. So then we said, we can't just write a pattern book because, pattern books, they're nice and everything, and hopefully they are going to be the tool that people are going to use if they're well written to help us shift that paradigm. But they're kind of like address the icing on the cake, the plants. And we needed to look at the cake because that was the problem. So we pivoted and we said, we're going to write some standards for high-performing landscapes. And I'm sure all of you have heard that term before. And so we ended up writing a blueprint for writing community landscape standards. And we used Wildlight as our case study. And so it morphed into a much bigger document. And we were looking at the goals for the Collab goals, and we said, let's try to align with their goals too as we're writing this document. And the one that it really aligns with is the one talking about a more sustainable approach to landscapes and looking at them from design to implementation and to maintenance. So I'm just going to go over these four standards that we discussed. We have like 8, maybe 10 standards in the book that we actually addressed. First one, the ecological design principles. So this one is really important, and a couple of people have mentioned this already. We looked at what you normally look at: soil, plants, water, and maintenance. And then we put people right in the middle of it. And we said, this is an urban environment, it's the built environment, and we're responsible for it. And so we really need to go with the socio-environmental look at this at a much kind of higher level. And we need to look at what their needs are, because they are the dominant element in an urban environment. We need to look at their needs. We need to look at their perspectives and also their preferences, how they perceive landscapes, their social norms around landscapes, because we know mimicry, in neighborhoods is really high. And we said, okay, we really need to look at this socio-environmental because, we're the ones that screw up the soil generally. We're the ones that don't pick the right plants, we don't use the right irrigation system, and we don't have the best management system. So, and so we looked at a lot of books. I have some research plots where I'm actually doing ecological design principles in the plot, so I was very familiar with it. But these are some of the books that we also referenced. So that was one of the standards. Another one is management plans. And we said, we got to go way back because soil is a problem here. And so we wrote some information about soil management and vegetation protection. So going back to the soil there at Wildlight, it's in the Florida-Georgia low country. It's called low country for a reason. And there's a lot of water there. And it also has very fine soils, and it does not drain, or sandy soils, and it doesn't drain very well, and there's clay layers too. So here's a picture right here of Wildlight, and you can see here's the natural vegetation. And one of the great things about wildlife is they have a ton of conservation area. But this is the natural vegetation right down here. They had to bring in a lot of fill dirt. This was about a 8-foot high berm for the road there, and the houses are all on fill dirt. Our understanding is the fill dirt came not just from the stormwater ponds, but also from a borrow pit in Florida and another borrow pit in Georgia. So they also have foreign soil here in their, that's for all the Georgia people here for your benefit. And so then we said, okay, not only soil management, but protect this vegetation here, stormwater strategies, another management plan for invasive plants and weeds. And that's because we noticed this in some yards, people throwing down cardboard to try to suppress weeds in the torpedo grass, and that's not a management plan, throwing cardboard down in your front yard. And also with the irrigation here, the heads up on risers when you should be using drip irrigation. So those are just a few of the management plans. And there's tons of information out about writing management plans. The other thing that we looked at was performance and site metrics, and we came up with some design strategies for high-performing or high-functioning landscapes, like using native and adapted plants, and also some functional measures. And we used as the Landscape Architecture Foundation, their landscape performance series, and their documents there to come up with these functional measures. And we developed this grid showing what functional measures go with which design strategies. The other thing that we looked at was site metrics. And the site metrics are typical pattern book where you put percent of native plants, percent of canopy coverage, percent of drought-tolerant plants. But the one thing that I want to point out here is if you write those really well so that they are measurable and accessible and enforceable, they can become your HOA landscape codes. And it's a very good way to write codes so you are not using codes that are weird from other people, which a lot of people do. Okay, then we also looked at placemaking and walkable streets. And one of the reasons why that was very important is because Wildlight has partnered with the College of Medicine, UF Health, and they have 2 wellness hubs that they are building in the development. And so they wanted to promote optimal design for health. And so they have smart parks, bicycle and pedestrian systems, and walkable neighborhoods. So we were writing standards for walkable streets. I did my dissertation on walkable streets, so I have a bit of knowledge about that. And then also placemaking. And placemaking is hugely important because if you make a space a place, research has shown that people will value it more. It has more emotional value and more meaning to them, so they will care about it more, and they'll take better care of it, and they'll exhibit more pro-environmental behaviors. And so that's what we want, people that live here in Wildlight to see this as a place and not just a space. So last slide. Oh, no, I got to tell you about the Wildlight pattern book. So what we did is we went back and we looked and we said, okay, let's just tweak it a little bit, because it wasn't a terrible book, but we introduced a couple of things. Well, we revised their plant metrics because we thought those needed a little bit of change, and eliminated some of the plant zones that they had in the front yard because the front yards are only about 10 feet deep, similar to the ones that we saw yesterday. And there really is no point in dividing it up into zones. It's so small. So we eliminated those. But the other thing that we introduced was the braided front yard. The idea of this long linear park that all the vegetation just flows from one yard to the next and creates a linear park along the road. And so these images here show that, the vegetation just going along, and also the plan view image shows that. So you guys have all heard of the High Line in New York, right? And so now they have the Underline in Miami, under the Miami Metro. So we're calling this the front line. Front yards, like a long linear park here. And we also came up with some plant blocks that you use to arrange your plants. This is sort of like putting puzzle pieces together. So the last slide now that I wanted to show you, and this was the pictures that Nick was referring to, and it's all about shifting the urban landscape paradigm. So I collect old postcards, and I had this postcard, and on the back of it, it's postmarked 1920. It's in Coral Gables. And the scribble writing, this person had sent this to a friend in Chicago or something, and they said, "How do you like my beautiful Florida landscape?" on the back. And I was looking at it, I go, what? 1920? That looks like our landscapes right now. And then I was looking through my pictures, and I go, oh, this one looks just like that postcard. Turf, colorful foundation plants, and that iconic one palm tree in the yard. So I was reflecting on that, and I said, 100 years, we haven't changed. And so I think that food for thought here is, what are we going to do in the next, 10, 50 years to change that landscape paradigm? And I think that we already have enough science and to move forward with that. We don't have all the answers, ecological science, but the thing is, we need more of the social science, a lot more of that socio-environmental, knitting them together and looking at that and paying attention to people's preferences and so forth. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Johan.
Hello. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes, great. I have my cheat sheets here just in case. Okay. So, hello everybody. My name's Johan Bueno. I work for Dix Height. So today we're going to talk about the New York Pattern Book, which a lot of you have seen already. It's available on the outside Collab website. But really, I'll be focusing more on the new updates to it. Another caveat to kind of add to this is that the pattern book we're planning to continuously update it over the years with relevant information and as we learn things with the test plots that we've seen. So this is just showing you guys the updates to the current pattern book. So just want to point out the team here. A special shout out especially to our interns, Jacob, who's actually in the auditorium right now, and Emma from Purdue University, and then Liz from UF. They did a great job. And then also our friends here at the Nature Conservancy, Kirsten and Leslie, who presented earlier. They really collaborated with us, and we were able to put this together because of their help. I also want to make sure we mention the Fish and Wildlife Foundation. The project was funded with the help of the Fish and Wildlife Foundation via proceeds from their Project Florida Springs License Plate Fund. So just a quick summary of the current pattern book. We decided to turn it into our intern summer studio project. So it's been an ongoing collaboration, obviously. Currently, the pattern book, really it's a comprehensive guide for landscape residential development. It emphasizes a lot of landscape principles, which enhance your yard's ecology and really the functionality of it, and we help maximize really the homeowner experience through the pattern book. There's also really significance put on the idea of program spaces in our yards. It aids homeowners really in comprehending the layout of hardscape and landscape materials. And the core objectives of the book and of these principles really push forward the big four, as we call them, which are the big four goals of the book, which is to minimize water use, minimize pesticide and fertilizer use, and then maximizing biodiversity opportunities in your yard. So really, we're just, with the pattern book currently, it's helping us create a framework, a landscape framework in our yard that will not only benefit the environment, but hopefully your lives and your homes. So just speaking a little bit of the expanded content of what we actually added. While the first edition, as we're calling it, talks a lot about the design guidelines, we wanted to really expand the book and add a lot of weight to the why, the what, and the how of the book. So with these expanded contents, we add more detail about Florida's ecosystems, which are primarily water-based. We talk a little bit about what the new yard actually is, how it functions. And then we added towards the end a lot of maintenance tips, pro maintenance tips on how to care for your yard during establishment and beyond. So again, this is just our expanded table of contents. It was shorter last year. It's taller. It's a lot bigger now. So the why. Why do we want you to have this new yard, right? This sustainable yard? Well, a big reason is our ecosystems. So our yards can have a big impact on Florida's ecosystems. The way we manage our yards really play an important role in the health of it, from the types of plants that we use, how we irrigate our yards, and our choice of fertilizers. So, we might not always live next to a wetland or lakes or rivers, but the water we put on our yards, including those pesticides and fertilizers, eventually do make their way to our waterways as runoff. So, with sustainable landscape practices, us homeowners, home builders, developers, we can help lessen those stresses on local ecosystems. Again, which include habitat fragmentation, pollution, invasive species, overwater use. And so with the help of the Nature Conservancy, we were really able to kind of fortify that why in our book and add some of the following pages I'm about to show you, which really highlight our ecosystems here in Florida and some of the threats that they face from human activity. So I'm going to run through some of these pretty quickly, just because we don't have a lot of time. But again, these dive in a little bit more into what those ecosystems are, the types of threats that they face, and eventually, how you can help to mitigate those threats. So we have aquifers, springs. Fun fact, Florida's home to the most freshwater springs in the world, so that's pretty great. Even more reason to protect it. Rivers and lakes. Again, a lot of these have to do with runoff and pollution. Nearshore ecosystems. And we also wanted to include wildlife. Wildlife is very important here in Florida. There's a lot of fragmentation going on with development and greenways, so it's a very important aspect to our ecosystems to protect as well. Next, we wanted to expand on the what, which really in this case is our yards. So really the first step to shifting society's mindset to accept this sort of new sustainable residential development type, it's shifting their mindsets, which is, I think, a really hard job to do. There's a lot of resistance. But from what you can see, a yard is a lot more than simply just turf and shrubs at the foundation. Traditional yards oftentimes, have minimal canopy, extensive sod, a lot of non-native ornamentals, really a lot of little biodiversity opportunity. While, this sort of new yard features a lot more canopy. It's planted for biodiversity. It features a lot of native drought-tolerant plants, mulch beds, and a really important aspect to this that we're really trying to drive home is the idea of outdoor living spaces and bringing some of those activities you like to do inside, outside, which helps lessen how much you have to landscape. It makes it more functional. So really trying to drive that as well. And so following these landscape strategies, we're able to, and understanding the benefits of those strategies in action, we're able to protect Florida's natural ecosystems, but also push forward the big four goals that we have, which are summarized here. But again, it's low water use, pesticide and fertilizer use, and then maximizing biodiversity. So moving on. There's a large portion of the pattern book that has to do with those landscape strategies and planning. That portion was left unchanged, really, but there are some lessons learned. And just a quick overview of that portion, really it's about helping you program your yards, how then you can use hardscape and landscape elements to define those spaces, and then choosing right plants for the right place, and putting that all together to get a really final product that'll help push those big four goals. And we're hoping that this really can be applied to any lot in the state of Florida. And so a lot of you were out at the tours yesterday. I don't know if all of you were, but you've seen this sort of be put in action with the test plots at the Sunbridge homes. And so we've learned a lot of lessons so far, even just now. And the big one that we face is just resistance from home builders and even some homeowners. It's a big change. It's not what they're used to. So we're having to kind of deal with that. And let me make sure. So one approach that we've seen in dealing with that and talking with some of our clients in different municipalities is that really the cost needs to be neutral or less for that to be really accepted. We can't add more to homeowners than they already have when they buy new homes. And just with the way the market is at the moment, we have to make it really easy for home builders to buy into these communities. Next, the how, which is a lot to do with the maintenance portions of the pattern book, which is towards the end of the book. We expanded on these areas with the help of the Nature Conservancy. We worked a lot with them, referenced a lot of Cherry Lake videos for maintenance guides, which are available on YouTube and the Outside Collab website. Working with them, we helped create these maintenance pro tip sheets at the end that can really be used individually. You can just pull them out. And hopefully it just helps homeowners take care of their landscape during establishment and beyond. So with the approach to this landscaping, not only does it move the big four goals forward by limiting irrigation, fertilizer, and pesticide use, but it also helps other aspects of maintenance as well, such as the amount of time you spend maintaining your yards. It usually lessens it. There's also the overall cost of maintenance associated with these new maintenance practices. I mean, think about currently with conventional yards, there's the trucks, the trailers, the mowers, the weed whackers, all the noise associated with that. We're hoping that with this new landscape management strategy that maintenance sort of strategy can be lowered to really a handful of landscape maintenance guys that are really just hand weeding and mulching and potentially edging and lowering the cost of maintenance in your yard. So I'm just gonna also kind of quickly go through these sheets. A lot of cool sheets though. We have one about pest control, how to identify harmful or helpful insects in your yard. Weed control, controlling weeds in your yard. Is that really a weed? Maybe not. especially with native landscapings. Funny story, we worked on a project once and the landscape guys picked out all the dune sunflower because they thought it was weeds. And David in our office was just, I think he had nightmares about it. Proper pruning and trimming, deadheading, ensuring the right conditions. This sheet's really about right place, am I saying that? Right place, right plant, right place. Understanding sun and shade. And we learned a lot too in our tours that soil is very important and can really help, the quality of your yard, lower irrigation, all kinds of stuff. So, and then lastly, how to maximize biodiversity and wildlife in your yards. So really cool. There's more. These are just a couple of them that we showed, but just some maintenance tips for the homeowner. A lot of discussions too at the tours were, because we saw a lot of really great yards, but then some yards that didn't look so great. A lot of that has to do with maintenance. When you turn that over, do the homeowners know how to maintain it? Do current maintenance guys know how to maintain that? It's something that needs to be taught and educated so that we can, maintain our yards properly. And then lastly, hopefully that wasn't too quick. Let me make sure I got the right spot here. So again, I just want to drive home the point that the New York Pattern Book is going to continuously be updated. We're doing the test plots. We're pushing the pattern book everywhere we can, really excite in our own projects. We're trying to apply these principles on the projects that we work on. We're working with different jurisdictions, such as Groveland, to help their code implement a lot of these landscape strategies. And a lot of people that work at the Excite are also implementing this in their own backyards. A lot of the pictures that you saw are actually from a couple of our employees' yards that they've designed this way. And so lastly, as we continue to work and push the pattern book to as wide an audience as we can, through those efforts, we can continue to peer review the pattern book and update it over time. And so as we learn what works and what doesn't, hopefully your yards can evolve and change to not only meet the demands of the environment, but also, our own needs and wants that we like to get out of our homes. And, just to kind of leave you on a really, hopefully positive note, a quote by Doug Tallamy, who's co-founder of Homegrown National Parks, also a professor. He says, in the past, we have asked one thing of our gardens, that they be pretty. Now they have to support life, sequester carbon, feed pollinators, and manage water. Thank you.
Sure. I don't know. Do you guys, if there's questions?
Yeah, we don't have questions.
Go.
My question is, do you have specific plant maintenance? Because I looked at the maintenance that you have here, but it's pretty generalized. Does anybody have, I know that there are a lot of growers out there and everything like that, but everybody seems to have their own data all on their own. It's not out somewhere where you can be like, do I cut this back? When do I cut this back? It's based on personal experience, and no, it's not consolidated anywhere. So what you got?
So do you mean like for each plant specifically, how you maintain that plant? Well, we don't do that in the pattern book because it would be much more than we can address in the pattern book. And but the standards, in a standards book, we could address some of that. But UF-IFAS has a lot of information on maintenance of different plants. So if you go to the UF website, just a regular website, and you look under EDIS, if you type in, EDIS publications, they'll get to those, and just type in management for each of those different plants. So that's one source that I'm very familiar with. I don't know what you guys use, if you guys use any for
We use IFAS a lot.
IFAS.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's probably the first thing we go to first before we
Okay.
go down the Google rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a rabbit hole for sure. You can just say it and I'll
Okay.
repeat it.
My question is, this is great for new home build, new projects. Do you have any strategies or any case experience with existing developments, existing communities that have their own design guidelines, and how can we convince them to work this into their
To
existing?
retrofit, go back and start over. Well, that was sort of what us looking at the Wildlight pattern book, because they wanted us to kind of assess it before they moved on to the other neighborhoods that they were going to be building in the development. So that pattern book was just for a small neighborhood in their first phase. And so, yes, we recognized that there were issues, problems with it. And so that is what we're addressing in the, I guess you'd call it the do-over or the rewrite of the pattern book, and saying, as you're moving forward, do things a little bit differently. And I don't know how they could encourage the homeowners of the homes that we saw the kind of weird stuff going on to tear everything out and start over. I'm not sure how you could do that, but it is a rewrite or kind of a do-over of a pattern book. I don't know if you...
I think a lot of it has to do with just the numbers, really, when it comes down to it. You can tell somebody that, hey, this yard performs a lot better, trust me, but unless you have really hard, concrete data that shows how much money you're saving, how much water you're saving, how much less time you might be spending in your yard, I think those kinds of things can really help push not just homeowners, right, but whole developers and communities.
I also think it has a lot to do with the education of the people who maintain the landscapes, the landscape contractors, and hoping that they'll talk to the homeowners and say, hey, if we do this a little bit differently, can we change out some of these plants in your yard? Can we reduce the turf in your yard and make slow changes? Because we all know change is hard for everyone. Just to make these slow incremental changes to an existing landscape to help improve it and change that paradigm again and change it into a more ecological landscape. So those are the people that have the direct contact with the homeowner, and they would be the ones that would probably be most successful in saying, hey, let's try this or do this.
Yep, and Cherry Lake's doing a really amazing job with those kinds of efforts. So we need more, I think, maintenance people like that for sure, and installers.
Couldn't agree more. That's what it's all about, is changing the paradigm, whether it's starting over from an existing landscape or starting fresh with some of the tools that we've looked at here. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Johan. Please give them a round of applause. Great work.